My husband died in a tragic accident just days before my delivery. When I finally gave birth to twin boys in the hospital, my own family burst into the room. My heartless father slapped me across the face, snatched my newborn son away, and handed him over to my brother and sister-in-law. As they ran toward the door with my husband's last remaining legacy, they thought they had successfully robbed a helpless, grieving widow, but they didn't know that my hand was already on a hidden emergency button under the mattress. I had just turned that hospital room into a terrifying trap, and what happened next completely destroyed my family for generations. Before I tell you how I brought my family to their knees, I want to know who is standing in my corner today. Where in the world are you watching this from, and what exact time is it on your clock right now? Drop your city and time in the comments below. I read every single one of them. Now, let's get back to the night my life changed forever. My name is Victoria. I am 30 years old, and if you had asked me just a year ago what family meant, I would have told you it was everything. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, where the moss hangs heavy from the oak trees and the old Southern families preach loyalty like it's a second religion. In my house, that loyalty was a one-way street. I was raised to be the quiet one, the compliant daughter who didn't stir the pot, the sister who naturally stepped into the shadows so my brother Caleb could stand in the spotlight. For 30 years, I kept my head down, swallowed my own voice, and convinced myself that absorbing their emotional blows was just my duty. I thought that's what it meant to be a good daughter and a good sister. Then I met Ethan. Ethan was a structural engineer, a man who looked at the world through the lens of foundations, blueprints, and concrete stability. But when he looked at me, he saw someone worth protecting. For the 3 years we were married, he showed me what a real foundation felt like. He built a perimeter around my heart that my family's manipulation couldn't penetrate. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just an afterthought or a utility. I was cherished. We bought a modest, sunlit home on the outskirts of Savannah, away from the suffocating presence of my parents, Arthur and Eleanor. Ethan worked grueling hours on project sites, and I managed our household, saving every penny we could because we were building a future based on genuine respect and mutual love. It was a beautiful, quiet life, a stark, peaceful contrast to the transactional cruelty I had grown up with. Ethan taught me how to stand tall, how to speak up, and how to believe that I deserved happiness without having to pay a tax to my family for it. He gave me the innocence and security I had been denied my entire childhood. But looking back, I realized that very innocence is what made me blind. It made me completely oblivious to the fact that the people who shared my DNA weren't just difficult. They were predatory. They were watching my happiness build from afar, waiting for the perfect moment to tear it down and strip my life for parts. In a family like mine, you are only as valuable as what you can give, and the moment you stop giving, you become the enemy. For years, my father, Arthur, and my mother, Eleanor, treated my bank account like a collective family safety net. I was working 2 jobs in my 20s, saving up every single dollar because I wanted to buy a life of my own. But whenever Caleb needed something, my phone would ring. 4 years ago, Caleb met Chloe. Chloe was a woman who demanded the world on a silver platter, and Caleb was more than willing to steal from everyone else to hand it to her. When they got engaged, they planned a wedding that was far beyond their means. One evening, Arthur and Eleanor sat me down in their living room. There was no warmth, no pleasantries. Arthur just looked at me and said, "Caleb needs your savings. He needs a head start in life, and as his older sister, it's your responsibility to provide it." I had saved exactly $15,000. It was my independence fund, the money that meant I never had to beg them for anything again. I cried, I argued, and I told them I was planning my own future, but the emotional blackmail was suffocating. My mother wept, calling me selfish, while my father threatened to disown me and tell the entire extended family that I was a cold, ungrateful daughter. I cracked under the pressure. I transferred the entire $15,000 to Caleb's account. At his wedding, as I watched them pop expensive champagne, neither Caleb nor Chloe even looked my way to say thank you. I was just the ATM that made their dream day happen. But the real nightmare began 2 years into their marriage. Caleb and Chloe had been trying to have a baby, but it wasn't happening. After dozens of doctor appointments and expensive specialist visits, They received the definitive medical diagnosis. Chloe had severe irreversible complications. She was completely infertile. The news broke something inside Chloe. Her grief quickly curdled into a bitter, toxic obsession. She couldn't stand the sight of pregnant women, and my parents immediately adopted her madness. The whole household revolved around Chloe's tragedy, and Caleb used it to get even more sympathy and financial handouts from our parents. Then, Ethan and I found out I was pregnant. And it wasn't just one baby. We were having twins. The moment we shared the news, the entire dynamic shifted. There were no congratulations. There were no hugs. My mother looked at me with cold, calculating eyes, and Chloe literally got up from the table and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind her. A week later, Arthur called a family meeting at a local diner on the edge of town. He didn't invite Ethan. He told me to come alone. When I sat down, the trap was sprung. Arthur looked across the laminate table, cleared his throat, and told me that since Ethan and I were being blessed with 2 boys, it was my moral and family duty to give one of the twins to Caleb and Chloe. He sat there, completely serious, detailing how they had already picked out a nursery and how it would fix everything in the family. "You and Ethan can't afford 2 kids on a single engineer's salary anyway," Arthur said, his voice dropping into that low, commanding tone he used to control me my whole life. "Chloe is dying inside. You have 2. It's only fair you give 1 to your brother." I sat there, my stomach turning, feeling my babies kick inside me for the first time. The sheer, unadulterated disgust I felt gave me a wave of courage I had never possessed before. I stood up, knocked my chair back, and looked my father dead in the eye. "Are you insane?" I whispered. "These are my children. Ethan's children. We are not a breeding service for Caleb." When I got home and told Ethan, he was furious. He called Arthur immediately and drew a hard, unyielding line, telling him that if anyone so much as mentioned taking our children again, we would cut them off permanently. My family's response was instant and brutal. They completely cut us off. They cursed my pregnancy, blocked my number, and ignored me for months. They treated me like I was dead, simply because I refused to let them traffic my unborn son. At 38 weeks pregnant, your body is heavy, your mind is exhausted, and you are entirely focused on the horizon of a new life. I was counting down the days until Ethan would hold our boys, but on a Tuesday evening that will be burned into my memory until the day I die, my phone rang. It wasn't my family. It was an officer from the Savannah Police Department. Ethan's truck had been struck broadside by a reckless driver who ran a red light at an intersection near his project site. The impact was cataclysmic. The officer's voice sounded hollow, like he was speaking down a long, dark tunnel. He told me Ethan had passed away before the paramedics could even extricate him from the vehicle. I didn't just cry. I felt my entire soul detach from my body. I collapsed onto the hardwood floor of our living room, clutching my swollen belly, screaming Ethan's name into an empty house. The man who had protected me, the only person who had ever truly loved me for who I was gone in an instant. I was entirely alone. For 3 agonizing days, I sat isolated in that house. I didn't sleep. I could barely breathe. I watched the phone, praying for a miracle, praying for my family to act like a family. I knew they knew. Extended relatives had posted condolences online. Yet, from my father Arthur, my mother Eleanor, or my brother Caleb, there was absolute, deafening silence. Not a single phone call, not a text message, not a knock on the door. They didn't come to see if I had food. They didn't ask if I was surviving. They left me to drown in my grief, punishing me even in my darkest hour for refusing their twisted demands months earlier. On the 4th night, the physical toll of the heartbreak caught up with me. Intense, white-hot labor pains struck my abdomen like a lightning bolt. My water broke right there on the living room rug. Terrified, weeping for Ethan, and barely able to stand, I crawled across the floor to reach my phone. I didn't bother calling my parents. I knew they wouldn't answer. I dialed 911 myself. I rode to the Savannah Memorial Hospital in the dead of night, squeezed into the back of an ambulance, holding the hand of a stranger paramedic who kept telling me to breathe. The labor was a grueling 12-hour descent into hell. Every contraction felt like it was ripping my fractured heart wide open. I didn't have a husband there to hold my hand, to wipe the sweat from my forehead, or to reassure me that we were going to be okay. I only had the sterile walls of room 412 and the quiet, compassionate instructions of Dr. Hayes, the attending obstetrician. At 6:14 a.m., through sheer survival instinct and a desperate desire to protect Ethan's legacy, I gave birth to two beautiful, healthy boys, Asher and Silas. When the nurses placed them on my chest, I wept tears of pure exhaustion and bittersweet relief. They had Ethan's dark hair. They were perfect. For a brief moment, the agonizing pain of my husband's absence was softened by the warmth of my son's breath against my skin. The nurses eventually moved them to two small bassinet carts right beside my bed so I could rest. Just 2 hours post-delivery, while I was drifting into a medication-induced sleep, the heavy wooden door to room 412 violently burst open. I bolted upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. I expected a medical emergency. Instead, marching into my room in a tight, aggressive formation were Arthur, Eleanor, Caleb, and Chloe. There were no flowers. There were no tears of sympathy for my widowhood. Chloe was wearing a heavy winter coat, and in her arms she was carrying a brand new, empty infant car seat. My father walked right up to the side of my bed, towering over me. His face was completely devoid of empathy. He looked at my pale, sweat-streaked face and spoke in a cold, matter-of-fact voice that chilled me to the bone. God took Ethan because he knew you couldn't handle two boys alone, Victoria, Arthur said, his eyes shifting over to the bassinets. It's a sign. The universe has corrected your selfishness. We are taking Asher today. Caleb and Chloe are going to raise him. It's settled. You will sign the temporary guardianship papers before you get discharged. I stared at him, completely paralyzed by the sheer, unfathomable cruelty of his words. Get out! I choked out, my voice trembling but rising in anger. Get away from my children! Ethan is dead! How can you do this to me? I lunged out of my blankets, throwing my body over the two bassinets, fiercely clutching my newborn sons to my chest. You are not touching them. Leave! Arthur's face darkened with rage. Don't you dare raise your voice to me, he snarled. Before I could even blink, his heavy hand swung forward. The impact was loud and violent. He database slapped me hard across my left cheek, sending a blinding shockwave of pain through my face. My head snapped back against the pillows, and for a second, my vision went completely black. Taking advantage of my disorientation, Caleb stepped forward, pushing his way past my mother. In the chaos and the blinding panic, his cowardly hands reached into the bassinets, grabbing Silas by mistake, tearing my crying newborn son away from my body. The stinging heat of my father's slap radiated across my left cheek, leaving a deep, throbbing ache that seemed to echo through the hollow spaces of my fractured life. But as I lay back against the hospital pillows, watching my brother Caleb awkwardly cradle a crying, terrified Silas while Chloe reached out with open, greedy arms, something inside the compliant, submissive daughter I used to be broke completely. It didn't just break, it dissolved into ash. For 30 years, I had shrunk myself to fit into their twisted narrative, but looking at my newborn son being handled like a stolen piece of property, the crushing grief of losing Ethan suddenly transformed into a freezing, calcified rage. The tears stopped instantly. My breathing slowed. I looked up at my father's arrogant, unblinking glare, at my mother Eleanor's cold indifference as she watched her daughter get assaulted, and at Caleb's cowardly posture. I realized with absolute clarity that being sweet, understanding, or trying to appeal to their humanity was a fatal weakness. They didn't have humanity. They were predators, and they would exploit my sorrow until they completely ruined my life and stole Ethan's legacy. Put him back, Caleb, I said. My voice wasn't a scream anymore. It was low, steady, and dropping to a dangerous whisper that actually made my brother pause. Shut up, Victoria, Arthur snapped, stepping closer to intimidate me, his hand still twitching from the blow he had just delivered. You're a widow now. You have no money, no husband, and no say in this. We are protecting this family. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. Instead, with my left hand hidden completely beneath the heavy, blood-stained hospital blankets, I slid my fingers along the plastic guardrail of the bed. My fingers searched frantically until they locked onto the hard, raised plastic of the emergency staff alert and panic button. I pressed my thumb down onto it with every ounce of strength I had left, and I held it down. I knew how the hospital's system worked. Holding that button down didn't just flash a light at the nurse's station. It opened a direct live audio intercom line right into room 412 so the floor coordinators could assess the severity of a patient's crisis. I kept my thumb anchored to that button, staring directly at my father. "Say it again, Arthur," I said out loud, intentionally raising my pitch so the microphone would capture it perfectly. "Tell me again how you, Arthur, and my brother Caleb are going to force me to give up my son Silas to Chloe just because Ethan died 4 days ago. Tell me how hitting your freshly delivered daughter gives you the right to kidnap my baby." Arthur blinked, his arrogance making him completely blind to the trap. "It's not kidnapping when it's family, you ungrateful bitch," he bellowed, stepping directly into the acoustic zone of the wall panel. "We are taking this child, and if you open your mouth to anyone, I will ensure you never see a dime of help from us again. Caleb, put the boy in the carrier. We are leaving." I looked past my father's shoulder and saw the small green indicator light on the wall intercom blinking rapidly. The trap was sprung. The heavy silence that followed my father's final threat lasted less than 90 seconds. Suddenly, the door to room 412 didn't just open. It slammed against the wall with tremendous force. Dr. Hayes charged into the room, flanked by 3 robust, uniform-clad hospital security guards. Before my family could even process what was happening, the hospital's on-duty police detail, led by a stern, no-nonsense veteran officer named Officer Reynolds, flooded the space, their hands resting firmly on their duty belts. "Step away from the bassinets right now! Drop the child!" Officer Reynolds bellowed, his voice echoing off the sterile walls like a thunderclap. Arthur's face instantly drained of color. Caleb froze, his cowardly hands trembling as he stared into the barrel of a law enforcement officer's authority. In a split second of pure, unadulterated cowardice, my father didn't stand his ground. He violently shoved Chloe forward, using her as a human shield, and bolted toward the emergency exit stairwell at the back of the ward, with Caleb dropping Silas back into the bassinet and running right behind him. They left their wives behind without a single backward glance. Officer Reynolds immediately pinned Eleanor and Chloe against the wall, slapping heavy steel handcuffs onto their wrists. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, criminal trespass, and felony child endangerment," he announced. Chloe began to scream hysterically, her voice cracking as she watched her empty infant carrier get kicked across the linoleum floor, while my mother wept, begging the officers to recognize our family name. Dr. Hayes rushed to my side, her face pale with concern as she examined my left cheek. The skin was already swelling, a deep, angry purple bruise forming where my father's hand had struck me. She immediately called for a forensic photography kit, meticulously documenting the domestic assault to create an unassailable medical legal record. While the medical staff stabilized my blood pressure and brought my crying babies back to my chest, I sat up, completely detached from the chaos, and looked Officer Reynolds straight in the eye. I didn't shed a single tear. With absolute cold determination, I gave a comprehensive, unyielding recorded statement. I detailed the years of financial drainage, the $15,000 extortion, the systematic demands for my unborn children, and the physical assault that had just occurred. 2 weeks later, once I was medically cleared and my sons were stabilized, the Savannah Police Department provided a full marked escort to transport me, Asher, and Silas back to my home. The security was tight, but my real warfare was happening in the legal system. Within 10 days of the hospital ambush, Arthur and Caleb were tracked down by state investigators, huddled in a dingy interstate motel 50 miles outside Savannah. They were arrested without bail. Because the crime had taken place inside a medical facility against a postpartum patient and involved the attempted abduction of a newborn, the state of Georgia bypassed local processing and took over the prosecution entirely, elevating the charges to state-level felonies. Over the next few months, Extended family members and old acquaintances flooded my phone with desperate messages, begging me to drop the charges and protect the family name. I blocked every single one of them. I hired a relentless top-tier family attorney to secure lifetime, ironclad restraining orders. When the final trial date arrived, I chose not to sit in the same courtroom as my abusers. I requested, and the judge granted, special permission to deliver my testimony via an official secure video link from the safety of Ethan's home office. Looking into the camera, I laid out their cruelty for the court to see, destroying their defense with the hospital's live intercom recording. The judge looked down at the defendant's bench with absolute disgust. Backed by the forensic medical report of the assault, the hospital's intercom audio recording, and my unyielding video link testimony, the state-led prosecution completely dismantled my family's defense. The verdict was guilty on all counts, and the judge showed absolutely no mercy during sentencing. My father, Arthur, was sentenced to 12 years in a maximum security state penitentiary for felony child endangerment, assault on a medical patient, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. My brother, Caleb, received 8 years for his active role in trying to tear Silas away from me. Chloe and Eleanor were handed 5-year sentences each for their roles in the conspiracy and trespassing. They walked out of the courtroom in orange jumpsuits, their wrists chained to their waists, facing the total ruin of their lives. The court granted me permanent, unappealable sole, legal, and physical custody of Asher and Silas, along with an absolute protective order that bars any family associate from coming within 1,000 feet of us. Furthermore, because of Ethan's stellar career as an engineer and the extreme tragic nature of our circumstances, the state officially approved a substantial, ongoing monthly survivor benefit and specialized social allowance, ensuring that my boy's financial future is completely secure. To stay close to my babies while processing my grief, I decided to channel Ethan's favorite hobby into building a new life. He always loved my cooking, so I launched a first-person digital cooking and home lifestyle channel right from our kitchen. I poured my heart, my recipes, and my raw story into the videos. Within months, the channel exploded globally, gaining over 1 million subscribers and securing our complete financial independence. Today, the sun is shining brightly over our backyard. There are no shadows of fear here. I am surrounded by my true friends, looking at a beautiful cake I baked myself. Asher and Silas are laughing, blowing out the single candle on their very first birthday cake. They have Ethan's eyes, and they will grow up knowing that their mother went to hell and back to keep them safe, whole, and loved. Looking back at that hospital room, I realized that the hardest part wasn't just the physical pain or the grief. It was the heartbreaking realization that the people who share your blood can sometimes be the most dangerous people in your life. But standing up for my sons taught me that true strength isn't about letting people walk over you in the name of family. It's about drawing an unyielding line to protect the ones you love. Karma always finds its way, and justice, though cold, is completely fair. I want to ask you honestly, do you think I did the right thing by letting the state send my own flesh and blood to prison? What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below. If you found value in my journey today, please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to join our community for more true-to-life stories every single day.